On the morning of August 6, 1945, Hiroshima woke up like any other Japanese city still standing. The war had ravaged much of the nation, but Hiroshima remained strangely untouched. Its streets were intact. Its bridges unbroken. Its factories still working. To many, it felt like luck. To the United States military, it was something else entirely, a perfect target. The sun rose quietly over the Oda River. Streetcars rattled along their tracks. Children prepared for school. Factory workers tightened their belts and stepped into another day of labor for an empire already on its knees. Air raid sirens remained silent. There had been no bombing the night before. No warning that today would be different. At 8 a.m., the city was alive. Hiroshima was not a random choice. It was a military hub, a communications center, a logistics port. But it was also a living city of nearly 350,000 civilians. American planners wanted a place that had not been previously bombed, a city whose destruction could be measured clearly. Hiroshima offered them something terrifying: clarity. High above the city, at more than 30,000 feet, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay cut through the clear blue sky. The aircraft had taken off from Tinian Island hours earlier, carrying a single bomb unlike anything humanity had ever built. Its name was deceptively simple: Little Boy. Inside the bomber, the crew was quiet. They had trained for this moment, rehearsed the mission again and again. Yet no amount of preparation could explain what they were about to unleash. Some believed the explosion would end the war instantly. Others feared it might ignite the atmosphere itself. No one truly knew. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb was released. For 43 seconds, it fell. No alarm sounded. No one looked up. The bomb dropped silently, a metal cylinder spinning gently as it descended toward the heart of the city. Beneath it, people walked, talked, laughed, argued, lived. Then the sun fell. A blinding white flash erupted above Hiroshima, brighter than anything ever witnessed on Earth. In an instant, temperatures at the center of the explosion reached several million degrees Celsius. Shadows were burned into stone. Human beings vaporized where they stood. The blast wave followed immediately, expanding outward at the speed of sound and beyond. Buildings disintegrated. Wooden houses collapsed into kindling. Glass turned into deadly rain. The city was flattened in seconds. Those closest to the epicenter ceased to exist. Further away, people were thrown violently through the air. Skin peeled from bodies like cloth. Eyes were burned blind. The river boiled. Fires ignited everywhere at once, merging into a single, unstoppable inferno. Hiroshima had become something no city had ever been before: a nuclear wasteland. Yet the true horror was only beginning. Those who survived the initial blast stumbled through the ruins, their bodies burned black, their clothes hanging in tatters. Many did not scream. Their throats were too damaged. Their faces too swollen. Their minds too shocked to comprehend what had happened. They walked silently, arms extended in front of them, skin dangling from their fingertips. They had no word for what they were experiencing. No concept of radiation sickness. No understanding that death was now inside their bodies, invisible and unstoppable. The sky darkened as a massive mushroom cloud rose miles into the air, sucking debris, ash, and human remains upward. Black rain began to fall, thick, oily droplets contaminated with radioactive particles. Those desperate for water drank it. By nightfall, Hiroshima was a city of fire and ghosts. And the world had crossed a line from which it could never return. When the light faded, Hiroshima did not return to normal. The silence that followed was not peace, but shock. A city that had been alive moments earlier now lay stunned, its heartbeat erased in an instant. Those who survived the initial blast emerged into a world that no longer obeyed familiar rules. Streets were gone. Buildings had collapsed into indistinguishable piles of rubble. Fires burned everywhere, yet there was no wind at first, only heat, intense and suffocating. People began to move, slowly, instinctively, as if walking might confirm they were still alive. Many were naked or half-dressed, their clothes burned from their bodies by the heat. Skin hung from arms and faces in strips, blackened and raw. Some survivors held their hands in front of them, palms facing outward, because the skin on their fingers had burned so deeply that clenching them caused unbearable pain. Others stumbled blindly, their eyes damaged by the flash. They called out for family members who would never answer. The city's rivers filled quickly. Drawn by unbearable thirst and the belief that water might save them, thousands crawled or staggered toward the water. Many never emerged. Bodies piled along the banks and floated downstream, carried by currents now choked with ash and debris. The water itself was warm, contaminated, and deadly, though no one yet understood why. Medical facilities had been obliterated. Of Hiroshima's doctors and nurses, the majority were dead or injured. Hospitals that still stood were overflowing within minutes. Classrooms, temples, and open fields became makeshift treatment centers. The wounded lay shoulder to shoulder, moaning softly, some too weak even to cry. There were no supplies. No antiseptics. No anesthetics. Doctors tore sheets into bandages, rinsed wounds with contaminated water, and performed amputations with little more than knives and courage. Fires spread uncontrollably. Wooden homes ignited one after another, merging into massive firestorms that consumed entire neighborhoods. Survivors who had escaped the blast were overtaken by flames hours later. The sky darkened as smoke rose in towering columns, blotting out the sun. Ash fell like snow, coating everything in gray. To many, it felt as though the world itself was ending. And then came the rain. Black rain fell from the sky, thick and oily, staining skin and clothing. It tasted bitter. People opened their mouths to drink it, desperate for relief from thirst. They did not know it carried radioactive particles, drawn into the clouds by the explosion and now returning to Earth. This rain poisoned the land, the water, and the bodies of those who believed it was a gift. As night fell, Hiroshima glowed red. Fires reflected off low clouds, turning the sky into a burning ceiling. Survivors huddled together in open spaces, afraid to sleep, afraid to close their eyes. Many died quietly during the night, their bodies giving up after hours of shock, burns, and unseen internal injuries. There were no funerals, no prayers, only the living trying desperately not to become the next corpse. Outside Hiroshima, the world struggled to understand what had happened. Reports were confused and fragmented. Some spoke of a single bomb destroying an entire city. Others dismissed these claims as exaggerations or propaganda. The scale of destruction defied existing military logic. No conventional weapon could do this. Yet the truth was even worse than the rumors. In Tokyo, Japanese officials received incomplete messages describing catastrophic damage but no clear explanation. Communications with Hiroshima had largely ceased. Reconnaissance planes were sent. What they saw from the air was incomprehensible: a flattened city, smoke rising from a vast, featureless scar. Hiroshima had not been bombed, it had been erased. Meanwhile, in Hiroshima, the survivors, later known as hibakusha, began to experience symptoms no one recognized. Wounds that seemed minor worsened rapidly. Hair fell out in clumps. Gums bled. Fever and vomiting spread among those who had appeared uninjured. People who had walked away from the blast collapsed days later and died. Doctors were helpless. There was no name for what was happening. Radiation sickness was not yet part of human experience. Children searched endlessly for parents. Parents searched for children. Many never found each other. Identification became impossible. Bodies were burned in mass cremations to prevent disease, their ashes mixed together, names lost forever. Hiroshima's population had been reduced by tens of thousands in a single morning, and the true number of dead continued to rise. Beyond the physical destruction, something deeper had been shattered. Survivors spoke of guilt for living when so many had died. They spoke of fear that the bomb had permanently cursed them, that they were no longer fully human. Some were shunned in later years, believed to be contagious or damaged beyond hope. Hiroshima's suffering did not end when the fires went out. It had only begun. The bomb was not just a weapon of war. It was a revelation. Humanity had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. In Hiroshima, that truth was written not in words, but in burned shadows on walls, in rivers filled with the dead, and in the silent cries of those who survived. The city would eventually be rebuilt. Streets would be repaved. Buildings would rise again. But beneath the new Hiroshima, the memory of August 6, 1945, would remain, an invisible wound, forever reminding the world of the day the sun fell from the sky. Some were shunned in later years, believed to be contagious or damaged beyond hope. Hiroshima's suffering did not end when the fires went out. It had only begun. The bomb was not just a weapon of war. It was a revelation. Humanity had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. In Hiroshima, that truth was written not in words, but in burned shadows on walls, in rivers filled with the dead, and in the silent cries of those who survived. The city would eventually be rebuilt. Streets would be repaved. Buildings would rise again. But beneath the new Hiroshima, the memory of August 6, 1945, would remain, an invisible wound, forever reminding the world of the day the sun fell from the sky. In the hours after the explosion, Hiroshima did not fall silent. It screamed. From beneath the ruins came voices burned into whispers, cries that cut through smoke and fire. People wandered the streets with skin hanging from their arms like torn fabric. Faces were unrecognizable. Hair was gone. Eyes were swollen shut. Many walked without knowing where they were going, driven only by pain and instinct. Some collapsed after a few steps. Others walked until they no longer could. This was not a battlefield. This was a city of the living and the dead mixed together. Fires spread everywhere. Wooden houses ignited instantly, merging into massive firestorms that devoured entire neighborhoods. Survivors fled toward the river, believing water would save them. Hundreds jumped in, their bodies already burning. The river filled with corpses, floating silently beneath a sky still darkened by ash. Those who drank the water often vomited violently within minutes. They did not understand why. No one did. Hospitals were gone. Doctors and nurses were dead or wounded. Medical supplies had turned to dust. The few surviving physicians worked in the open air, using scraps of cloth, bare hands, and prayers. Wounds unlike anything seen before covered the victims, burns with strange patterns, injuries without visible cause, bleeding that would not stop. People who appeared unharmed suddenly collapsed hours later, bleeding from the mouth and nose. The invisible enemy had entered their bodies. By nightfall, Hiroshima glowed red. The city burned as if the earth itself had been ignited. Survivors described the darkness as absolute, broken only by fires and the glow of embers. Ash fell like snow, coating everything in gray. Those who lay down to rest often never woke again. Others begged for water until their voices faded into silence. Outside the city, Japanese authorities struggled to understand what had happened. Communication lines were destroyed. Initial reports were confused, contradictory, almost unbelievable. A single bomb had destroyed an entire city. Military leaders refused to accept it. No conventional weapon could do this. Yet reconnaissance flights confirmed the truth: Hiroshima was gone. In the days that followed, a new horror emerged. People who had survived the blast began to fall ill. Hair fell out in clumps. Gums bled. Fevers raged. Purple spots appeared on the skin. Doctors were helpless. This sickness had no name yet. Radiation was invisible, odorless, and unstoppable. It lingered in the ruins, in the dust, in the bodies of the living. Children who had laughed days before now lay dying beside their parents. Pregnant women miscarried. Newborns were stillborn or deformed. Survivors would later be called hibakusha, people affected by the bomb, but in those first days, they were simply victims of something beyond human understanding. The psychological scars were as deep as the physical ones. Survivors spoke of guilt for being alive. Of seeing loved ones vaporized in an instant. Of shadows burned into walls where people once stood. These silhouettes became symbols of the bomb's power, human beings reduced to stains on stone. News of Hiroshima slowly reached the world. In the United States, initial reactions were celebration and relief. The war might finally end. Newspapers spoke of victory, of scientific triumph, Few images of suffering were shown. The true cost was hidden behind words like necessary and inevitable. 3 days later, before Japan could fully comprehend Hiroshima, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The message was clear. This was not an accident. It was a demonstration. Japan surrendered shortly afterward, ending World War II. But for Hiroshima, the war did not end in August 1945. It continued in hospitals, in homes, and in graves for decades to come. Long after the fires went out, radiation remained. Survivors faced discrimination, feared as contagious or genetically damaged. Many hid their identity. Others dedicated their lives to telling the story, to ensuring the world would never forget what happened when the sun fell on a city. Hiroshima became more than a place. It became a warning. A reminder of what humanity is capable of when science outruns conscience. The bomb ended a war, but it also began a new era, one where extinction itself became a possibility, and the shadows remained, etched into memory, asking a question that still has no answer: was this the price of peace, or the moment humanity crossed a line it can never uncross? When the fires finally began to die, Hiroshima no longer resembled a city. What remained was a silent expanse of ash, twisted metal, and shadows burned into stone. The explosion had lasted less than a second, but its consequences stretched into years, decades, and generations yet unborn. Survivors emerged from the ruins like ghosts, their clothes burned away, their skin hanging in strips, their eyes vacant from shock. Many did not even realize they were injured. Pain would come later. Hospitals no longer existed. Doctors and nurses were dead or wounded. Medical supplies had burned. The injured gathered along the riverbanks, begging for water. Some drank despite warnings, only to die moments later. Others collapsed where they stood, their bodies unable to endure the trauma. The air smelled of burned flesh, smoke, and chemicals no one could identify. Rain began to fall, black rain, thick with radioactive particles, staining skin and soil alike. In the days that followed, death continued its work. Those who had survived the blast began to fall ill. Hair came out in clumps. Gums bled. Vomiting and diarrhea weakened already fragile bodies. Purple spots appeared under the skin, signs of radiation sickness no one yet understood. Entire families who had survived the explosion together died together days later, silently, without wounds. The Japanese government struggled to comprehend what had happened. Initial reports spoke of a new type of bomb, one capable of destroying an entire city at once. Scientists dispatched to Hiroshima found no conventional explanation. Buildings flattened without blast craters. People dead without visible injuries. Shadows of human bodies permanently etched onto walls and steps. Something unprecedented had been unleashed. On August 9, 3 days later, a second atomic bomb fell on Nagasaki. The message was unmistakable. Japan faced annihilation. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation in a radio broadcast, his voice calm, restrained, and historic. Japan would surrender. The war was over. But for Hiroshima, the war had ended on August 6, at 8:15 a.m. In the weeks that followed, survivors, later known as hibakusha, were often treated as outcasts. Fear spread that radiation sickness was contagious. In the weeks that followed, survivors, later known as hibakusha, were often treated as outcasts. Fear spread that radiation sickness was contagious. Employers refused to hire them. Families hesitated to allow their children to marry survivors, fearing genetic damage. The bomb did not stop killing when the fires went out. It lingered in blood, in bone marrow, in unborn children. Years passed, and Hiroshima slowly rebuilt. Streets were cleared. New buildings rose where ruins once stood. But beneath the modern city, memory remained buried. Survivors told stories that sounded impossible, of skin melting, of people walking without faces, of a sun falling from the sky. Some were believed. Many were not. The world moved forward, eager to forget. Internationally, Hiroshima became both a warning and a justification. Some argued the bomb had saved lives by ending the war early. Others called it a crime against humanity. The debate never truly ended. What was undeniable was this: humanity had crossed a threshold. For the first time, a single weapon had demonstrated the power to erase a city, and potentially the world. The nuclear age had begun. In the decades that followed, nuclear weapons multiplied. Bigger bombs, faster delivery systems, entire doctrines built around mutual destruction. Hiroshima became a reference point, a ghost standing behind every political decision involving nuclear arms. Never again, leaders said, while building arsenals capable of repeating it thousands of times over. Today, Hiroshima stands as a city of peace. The atomic bomb dome remains preserved, frozen in time beneath the sky where the bomb exploded. Visitors walk its streets, hear the ticking of memorial clocks, and read names engraved in stone. Every year, at 8:15 a.m., bells ring, and silence falls. But silence cannot fully contain what happened here. Hiroshima was not just a military event. It was a human event. A moment when science, fear, and war converged, and the cost was paid by civilians who never chose to be part of it. The bomb did not discriminate between soldier and child, between factory and home, between past and future. When the sun fell on Hiroshima, it revealed something terrifying about humanity's capacity for destruction. And something equally fragile about its capacity for remembrance. The city was rebuilt. The scars were not. And the shadow of that morning still stretches across history, asking a question that has never truly been answered. Now that humanity holds the power to end itself in a single flash of light, will it choose not to?